In this video, we're going to be covering the essential basics of CSS Grid model, which is used for laying out web pages or sections of web pages. Let's go ahead and take a dive into coding CSS Grid. Okay, this right here is a familiar format. You already know, a typical HTML file that has the head and the body. And remember, within the head section, you must have to link your CSS file to the HTML file using the link tag. And on the right hand side of my screen here is a basic CSS format. You already know this is a general rule we apply to set the margin 0, padding 0, and box sizing. So let's go into it right away. Let's create a div with class name of container. The class name could definitely be anything you want. All right, inside of this our container, which happens to be the grid container, let's have about 6 divs inside of it as grid items to demonstrate how to lay out grid container. Grid item 1, let's duplicate and have up to about 6 of them. Grid item 2, grid item 3, grid item 4, 5, and 6. In grid item 1, we just put 1. Grid item 2, 2. Six. That's it. All right, then let's visualize stuff on the browser. This is what we have on the browser right now. Just the content 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's get on with some basic styling such that the web page will look a bit colorful. First off, let us style our div container using the select div.container. And let's give it a background color of aquamarine. Here it is. And let's give it a height of 100 VH. Let's see what we got. The font looks tiny. Let's get it to look bigger. Over to our code editor, let's use a font size of 24 pixels. That's a bit bigger now. Next, let's have our divs get a border. That's the grid items, which are 6 divs inside of the div with a class name of container. Now let's get this straight. This div with the class name of container is the grid container with 6 children, which are grid items. Let's give them the border that sets them apart. So this selector says all the divs inside of the div with the class name of container. Let's give them a border of 1, 2 pixels, solid orange. This is it. Border of 2 pixels, solid orange. So we have our 6 divs. As you very well know, a div is a block level element, so it spans the entire length of the screen. Good. Next off, let's get to use grid to lay out these divs in rows and columns. Time to set the container to a grid model. All we have to do is go to our div with the class name of container and set the display to grid. Having set display to grid, observe what happens. All the divs get spread out automatically, but then they are not yet in rows and columns. So what we're going to do in this instance to define them into rows and columns is to use the property called grid template columns. This grid template columns is the property we need to define how many columns we want our layout to have. Okay, so in this case, let's say we want the first column to be 200 pixels wide and we want the second column to be something like 120 pixels wide, and the third column, let's assume we're having 3 columns in this case, the third column to be 400 pixels wide. Let's go over and see what we got on our web page. So we defined here on our CSS that the container should have 3 columns. How did we define that? We got to define that by setting 3 values in here. That the first column should be 200 pixels in width, the second column should be 120 pixels in width, the third column should be 400 pixels in width. So this is exactly what we got here. 200 pixels, 120 and 400 pixels in width. Also, if we decide to set 4 columns, let's assume we have another column that is 200 pixels in width. What happens? We now have our divs occupy 4 columns, and after the 4th column, the 5th div goes to the next line, and just like that, because we specify that our layout should have just 4 columns. In like manner, if we specify that our layout should have 2 columns, this is what happens. The first 2 divs occupy the first 2 columns, and the next goes in line, occupy the next 2 columns, and just like that. I hope this is logically clear. So that is how you get to use the grid template columns to specify number of columns you want your layout to have. All right, here it's now 3 columns. Over to the web page, you see it's 3 columns. Also, we could use percentages to do this, in which case, let's say we want the first column to be 20% in width, the second column to be 30% in width, and then the last column something like 40% in width. That is it. The first column 20%, the next one 30 and 40. Yeah, that's the grid template columns property for you, which is the first and the most important property of the grid model.